welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who killed a man in Reno just to watch him die.
Tim Longo.
Hey. You got that? You got the significance of that one? That one's there's a couple steps.
It's ringing some bells, but it's not.
Okay, do you know who sang it? It's a song.
Oh,
Folsom Prison Blues.
Johnny Cash.
Right. Who is? What do they call him? What do they call him? What does he wear?
The Man in Black.
The Man in Black. Just like we're controlling a Man in Black. Gazing!
That's a deep cut. That's a reach, in fact.
Yeah.
But okay. All right,
we're all about the reaches with the IK, and holding on.
Oh yeah, that's true. There's a lot of IK reaching going on.
They're big critters.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a big Johnny Cash fan, so yeah, I should have known that. Well, yes. So Shadow of the Colossus. I think I always mess that up.
Yep.
Yeah, Ueda and Team Ico at the time, I think they were called Team Ico, right? Now they're Gen Design?
That's correct, yeah.
And kind of semi-independent from Japan Studio for Sony. Their second game, which took them a while to do as well,
yeah,
as I recall. I think it ended up coming out pretty late in PS2.
It came out in 2005, as I recall. I had just moved here to Maryland and was playing this. Yeah, it came out in October of 2005. So,
yeah.
But yeah,
I had left. I wasn't at Lucas at that point. But
neither one of us.
But Republic Commando had come out.
Oh yeah. We came out in March or April or February or something that year.
Yeah.
We were all gone. There weren't too many people left at LucasArts at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the second game. There wasn't nearly as long a gap between Ico and Colossus as there was between Colossus and Last Guardian, which was part of what was so surprising about Last Guardian being any good this past year.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway. So, last time we kind of started from the beginning, but I think we should pick up where we left off last time, which was just talking about the overall structure of this game being a series of essentially boss battles, and really everything else is sort of taken out, and we'll get to what I mean by that later, because I think it ties a lot into the world building, and it made me think a lot more, playing it this time and remembering all of these battles so well, but not remembering a lot of the stuff around it. Maybe partly because of how I played it before. Was really interesting to me, and so we'll kind of get into that. But yeah, it's anyway. So that's just kind of the general structure of this game. Everyone who's playing along certainly knows what's going on in this game. I think this is a game that people are aware of. I hope they are, because this and Ico are pretty important games to a lot of sort of modern game designers, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And each in their own way. We talked obviously a lot about Ico and the concept of companion, of a significant companion and sort of world as puzzle, if you will. And I'm trying to think if there were any. I feel like there were some notable games before Shadow that were really kind of boss battle centric. Maybe it goes back to like 8 and 16-bit games that did something like that, but and I forget there's one that just came out that is an indie game.
Titan Souls,
right? Yeah. Sort of again, a boss battle centric thing, and I think Cuphead is kind of very boss battle centric, but maybe not exclusively. But anyway, from a design perspective, the obvious thing is just the boldness of going after such a pure concept, right? And I remember vaguely when it came out, and kind of the chatter and buzz amongst developers was sort of like, really? It's a game just about boss battles? Like, how does that work? That doesn't seem like a good idea, And I feel like for the skeptic and cynics.
We should talk about why that would be so, right? The reason why you don't tend to think that it's a good idea not to have the boss battles is that you learn how to play the game on all sort of the cannon fodder.
And
you build that, and right, it has a natural arc of like I go and do this kind of filler stuff, and then I do the boss, and maybe usually there's like a dungeon or something. I'm going to get to the end of this dungeon or this area, and I'm going to complete that little arc of the story by fighting the boss. Right? I mean, there's lots of good reasons.
Yeah, the boss is
why
almost
it's
like
not just bosses. You know.
Yeah, and the bosses typically are not only just the final challenge in a section, but also a reward in a way, right? In fact, we talked a lot about this with Super Metroid, right? Like the bosses, the concept of each section having a boss that you are utilizing the mechanics that you've learned throughout the game and it also, the bosses in any game typically denote this sort of like escalation of mechanical use of all the different all the different abilities you're getting throughout the game, and so it's sort of like your ultimate test, the testing of your abilities on these bosses, and bosses provide wonderful pacing and crescendos for things, and not to talk too much about RC, but we with Public Commando we debated that off and on, and whether we were kind of going to go for more of the Halo model where there wasn't necessarily explicit boss battles and it was all about the sandbox and the combination of enemies versus which creates a boss kind of encounter versus one entity that everything is revolving around, and they chose in this game to kind of have that pacing and that crescendo really be much, I guess, spikier, if you know what I mean. If you're thinking about a line graph, and then you're kind of getting some of that pacing within the fight.
Deep valleys of lulls, right? I mean, basically, you're going from from the central temple. We'll get to how you get there and all that stuff, but you go from there. You go out and figure out which direction you're going to go, and then you just kind of ride for a while, right? So there's this long kind of. I mean, it's not dead space by any means, but it is really low intensity. Low intensity.
Very vacant, solitude, solitary.
And then this huge spike. Yeah. And it's really a twofold spike because you get the battle, but then you have, I guess on the downslope or the denouement of each battle, you've got, a little vignette happening where now you're going to be told, you see the results, right, and then you're going to be told what you're doing next.
Well, and to your earlier point about boss battles in games traditionally, which I think we're probably saying, things that any gamer would know generally, the pacing that you get and sort of the testing of that, and I guess, bosses are often talked about in terms of puzzle design, because a lot of times bosses will have some trick, especially like a Mega Man or a Super Metroid. There's some trick you have to figure out, right? Zelda, yeah. And that's the same here. But I would say that one thing I did forget, and I've played this game, I don't know, this is probably my fifth time all told.
Oh, okay. So for me, that's me with Ico, and this is my second time. I have not played this since it came out.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so I'd be interested to know how much you remembered. And I haven't played it in probably 5 years, but I forgot a few things. But what I was going to say is, even though there are those lulls in the open world as you're traveling from one Colossus to another, once you're there and they have that first cutaway letterbox scene where they kind of present the space and possibly present the boss to you, there still is this puzzle phase where you kind of, if you haven't played it before, you have to kind of figure out what the deal is.
Right.
And it is a nice, typically most of them have a nice slow lead into that before you're actually on top of the thing doing what you need to do. You know what I mean? So there's a sort of a sub-pacing even once the boss fight starts, which a lot of boss battles don't typically have. Once it's on, it's on. Mega Man is like, once they're shooting at you, it's like high intensity, and it's like a really steep spike versus like building to a spike.
Well, and the other thing that's happening there, at the beginning, as you say, when you're sort of introduced to these creatures, even in the first one, you're getting a sense of just how enormous this thing is and how majestic it is, and there's huge amounts of things going on in these little scenes, the first one, is this tall, kind of, humanoid shaped, but enormous, 10 stories tall, say, and you get a sense with they zoom the camera in, so that it still feels very close and large. You can really even accentuate how large it is. It's kind of walking on these two big like hooves. It's almost like a satyr or something like that. But everything's happening. There's this low rumble. The music fades away. There's this low rumble. You can hear the footprints. You can hear like clattering, dirt and stones and stuff as like that he disturbs. And the ground shakes, like the camera jumps, every time he hits the ground. The trees move. And like just everything is supporting like just how enormous this thing is. And how
the presentation,
how tiny you are.
Yeah, the presentation of each of the introductions. Do we want to kind of talk about the intro too, just to kind of set the stage a little bit?
Yeah,
like we did with
let's
Ico.
do that. Just for those who aren't playing along, just to kind of refresh, because that's the stuff actually I forgot the most about. I could have probably told you, like if you had shown me a picture of each Colossus, I could have told you everything about the Colossus battles. Before playing it again, even after more than 10 years. But the kind of the stuff with this Dormin and all that, that was a little iffy. I was like, oh yeah, there's this girl, and okay, the game starts with like this soaring bird high above like this impossibly craggy and high mountainscape. I mean, just like Ico, just ludicrously large. All the scale is just enormous in these games. And it kind of swings by and then trades over to this, young man riding a horse with a body in front of him, and wearing this black tunic.
Yeah.
So a couple things I just noted. Like, I mean, you already know very soon that he's more competent than Ico is. He shelters himself from the rain under an overhang. He seems to know what he's doing, and he has a sort of purpose. He's not being dragged here. He's got a goal in mind. And you get all this very easily from just a few shots. It's very, very short vignettes, like Ico was at the beginning, but to a different kind of purpose.
Well, and he's older. Yes. Or he looks older, right? And I know in my own headcanon and all of this back in the day, sort of like, I think part of me wanted this to be a grown-up Ico, right? And it's never been stated that it is or isn't, and he never will, and I don't think it matters, really. But, there's a connection there. He has a tabard on, right, that has similar kind of ancient Japanese markings on it, as I talked about in the last ones. And there's some of those similar themes come back in. But he is holding something. He's riding a horse, right, which is sort of already a step up from what Ico is able to do. But there is this sort of sense of him traveling, sort of like the opening of Ico, in that it was that group of soldiers that were taking Ico to the temple, right? But they're traveling through forests, and they're traveling a ways to go to some significant place. But in this case, he's riding a horse, his own horse.
Yeah.
But he is holding something and kind of going over hill and over dale and kind of through the rain, and you see a couple different biomes along the way as well. So you get a really good sense of travel, but there's still the solitude because he's by himself. And then you wanted to talk about when you see the first kind of architecture and structures and
the first structure is really enormous and compelling. It's this big long bridge with these sort of repeated kind of curved pattern to how they tie into the bridge itself. For the struts or supports, these long, tall towers, pillars, I guess, that reach up and then kind of bend. It reminded me of like something out of Antonio Gaudi, the Spanish architect, and like because it looks moderately organic because it's curved. Right. It's not just straight. Like it's curved, and then there's like a buttress so that it'll all hold together. But it's this long bridge, and he crosses all the way over into this tall structure, maybe a temple, And again, I think he descends a spiral.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the bridge is not unlike the bridge in a way in Ico, right? This concept of this long sort of bottleneck that you have to go. There's also the water in Ico, of course, that they use the boat, but
it separates it from it's like this deep valley, and the way to get into it is to go across this bridge and into this structure. But you couldn't be able to. There are cliffs basically that would prevent you escaping the valley if you were inside, and there were no bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So it is this kind of place cut away from everything else, just like in Ico. So we hear at this point, I guess he comes down and he takes this young woman off the horse, and she's certainly unconscious and I guess dead, right? I mean, we soon learn that she is dead. Yeah. And we hear this old man describe the place where they've arrived, which is this forbidden place, but where the souls of the dead can be brought back. So now we've got basically the whole of the story.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to be there, right? He specifically says...
You're not allowed to be here. Yeah. But it has this special power.
Yeah. And the power is to be able to... Well, yeah, and you get this sense, this voice literally from the sky kind of talks about the power and talks about how this is a forbidden place, especially for mortals. And you get this sense that your character has gotten there's some myth or legend about this place, that if you come here, you're actually able to bring someone back from the dead, from death, back to life. And so, obviously the kid has come here to do that, but not really knowing, other than hearing. I always interpreted, the voices' points, that probably everyone had heard this legend, or a fairy tale or nursery rhyme, and no one ever really thought that it was possible, and that you're not supposed to come here. And so he came here wanting to do it, but had no idea the gravity of how it would actually be possible to do it. But then throughout the conversation, he's kind of, short conversation he's having with this character up in the sky.
It's actually two different characters. Because the first thing is an old...
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. There's the narrator.
There's a narrator who gives you a little bit of the myth. And then he after he's put her on this altar, he is accosted by this voice from the sky.
Yeah, I wonder who the narrator is. I've never even thought about that.
Yeah. So I can't wait for you to play The Last Guardian, because there's just all these ripples.
Oh, shit. Really?
Because in some cases, the voice sounds very similar. Huh?
I said clean podcast.
Yeah.
It's appropriate that the first one of the times I cuss is for these games. But, yeah, it's true. I would like to think that there's some meaning behind who the narrator is. Obviously, it's an old man, as you said, and I forgot that they're separate.
Yeah, it's almost like a myth, but I mean, I have my theories about who that voice is.
Really? And it's coming from Last Guardian?
No, it's not. But thinking about it, now that I've played The Last Guardian and had time to think about that and what's going on there, there it's a lot clearer what's going on. But it made me, when I heard a voice in this one, which I had forgotten about, I was like, oh, I think I know who that is.
Whoa, that's blowing my mind. I would expect anyway, we don't.
It's not a connection. It's not like a direct connection. It's just like it made me think.
There's a theme.
That's all.
Okay. Well, so they set up sort of the forbidden aspect of this place, and then Dormin.
Yep.
Is the name of the voice from the sky, comes in.
Yep.
And starts kind of talking about how he's not supposed to be here, and the boy starts talking back to him and talks about the girl and why he's here. And I forget when. Oh, I guess before that though, some shadows appear, right?
Well, they do have this conversation a little bit.
Because
he basically says you're not allowed to be here. Yes, I could do that. You're not allowed to be here. and now you're going to die. And these shadowy enemies turn up.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
And he draws his sword as if he's going to fight. And they basically cower and disappear. They kind of dispel.
The sword has some sort of it actually sort of shoots something out of it, right? Like a vague power.
Yeah, it's a little Indiana.
He doesn't even swing it. He just points it.
Yeah, he just kind of points it. Yeah. And Dormin says, "Oh, you have the ancient sword. Oh, maybe we can deal." Basically, I could do what you want, but you need to do something for me. Yeah. And that's I want you to go and encounter and kill these 16 colossi that are represented by these statues in this room. And that's basically the end of the sort of introduction. I mean, it's basically, and he's like, "Oh, okay, if that's what it'll take," he's going to do it.
Yeah. And again, a room that represents sort of your progress, if you will, in a physical way, just like sort of the end of Ico with the guy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and he tells you that if you hold the sword up, I forget if he tells you or how you find out.
He does, yeah. He tells you if you lift the sword aloft, it'll tell you where the next Colossus is.
Yeah, yeah. And also,
so it's already more explicitly tutorializing.
Yeah.
Way more than ever Ico did. And in fact, I looked at the manual for this one just out of curiosity. I was looking to see if something else was in the manual, but I flipped through, and it reminded me some things that you could do. So we can talk about the controls a little bit more later. But
yeah, I didn't do that. So yeah.
But so it basically tells you, you can lift the sword, and it will point you in the direction of the next Colossus that you're to battle, and you have to kill all 16 of them, and then I'll do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and there's also another important figure that so the girl is laying on the slab there.
Yep.
Which as a small note, I've always loved the architectural design of that space.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be a subconscious thing, maybe intentional on their part or not, but for me, my interpretation of that slab that she's specifically laying on, how they have that suspended stone right above her, right? Like it's like this stone column that has a slice out of the bottom. So there's this sense of heaviness that is essentially right above her, right? That almost makes no architectural sense in a way. Like it would be so heavy.
Right.
In an ancient...
It's not apparently hollow or anything like that.
No, it doesn't connect to the ground, right? So there's really no support for it. So there's this otherworldly... I know I'm overthinking this, but I've played this game too much, and so there's this otherworldly aspect to just that one place, and I just always love that sort of art design. And that.
But I think it ties in, already to what's going on in the game, right? And things we've talked about is how heavy everything is.
Yeah, totally.
And weighty. I mean, there's just, there's not a lot of lightness in this game. No, everything is really...
It only gets worse.
Yeah, it only gets more grim.
Also, speaking of lightness, though, the other character I wanted to mention was Argo, his horse.
Agro.
Agro. Well, that's how he says it, but I think his official name is Argo.
I think you're wrong, but...
Really?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Agro. I will go with Agro then. I didn't look it up. Anyway, yeah, so the horse is actually...
It is Agro.
All right.
I'm looking it up now.
You win this one.
It's not Star Wars, so I can be right.
Yeah, you can't be right. But anyway, my point is just that the horse, as a companion character, and also as an animal, even though you see it obviously as quite a bit of, it's very much a utility-based character, right? Because you're riding it and getting to places, and you have to use it to actually, vanquish some of the colossi and things like that. But you do grow a connection with the horse over time, and the horse is a sort of this innocent, obviously animal bystander in a way to all of this, but also a companion, and there's... And it's there for you when you need it, and you can whistle and call it, and it just happens to have the Ico eye symbol on its head.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's got a little swath of white.
It's like a little. It looks like a tooth, sort of, but it's the actual
it's like
symbol.
the letter I.
From Ico. And there's an alt version of the horse you can get once you finish the game.
I feel like we should dig into the horse a little bit because, it's kind of almost a primer for what you're going to be doing. Like you're riding this horse, and you're going to ride a lot of these colossi as well. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you can actually grab onto the horse like you grab onto the colossi, which took a long time for me to remember. It can be frustrating to mount him, like Ico. It's really kind of moderately janky, and certainly in how you have to be positioned to do certain things at times.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of go up and put yourself in the right place and sort of use the jump button, which, if you're not in the right spot, just jumps him around and you miss the horse and everything. But you can do the same thing that you can do with all the creatures and in the sort of environment navigation, which you can jump and hold on to the horse, and it'll just kind of IK you onto the horse, and you'll pull yourself on. We talked about IK a little bit in terms of Ico. And Ico's like a dry run, simplest version of IK compared to this game, which has so much IK going on all the time, mixed with traditional animation. And really, for the PlayStation 2 era, is really quite extraordinary. The horse has IK. Wander himself has IK, both interacting with his arms in the environment, but also his legs. I think his run is really weird. And I think that's because of IK.
It's all, so just they have a style, whether they have intended to or not, but their animation style. And Ueda himself is an animator. His background.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how he started. He was actually an animation director first before becoming So I think that's why a lot of his projects are so animation heavy, and a lot of the way that they. The way that they, essentially present their ideas are very animation centric. Yeah. I assume Last Guardian is no
different. Yeah, no different. Yeah, I mean if you walk around on slopes and you can see the IK at work, and then when you're actually so part of the mechanics of the game are to be able to just climb around on stuff to get around, as well as the horse. Because when you get to that first Colossus, actually, you're going to be introduced to most of the mechanics of the game, kind of all at once. First, you got to get up to where it is, and that involves, what you would think of as kind of third-person action-adventure stuff, right? I mean, you're jumping, and you're jumping and holding on to stuff to climb, but those are separate actions in this game. We're kind of used to, from like Legend of Zelda, that you kind of run up to a thing, you hit jump, and it jumps and pulls you up or whatever. This is more like a mantle mechanic, except two separate buttons, right? It was one to jump, one to hold, and then once you're holding, you then have to press the jump button again to kind of actually do the mantle. So there's kind of like, it breaks this stuff down into steps.
Yeah,
much more so than games normally do.
Well, and the hold button by default is the same hold button from Ico.
That's right. For holding her hand, yeah.
For holding her hand, yeah.
The R1.
And as you start battling these giants, you see why those mechanics are separated, because there's different things you can do with them in different orders, and the way that they sort of all kind of cascade together. So you wouldn't. I think if this game tried to be, maybe it wouldn't have even been possible for them to develop it, but I think if this game tried to be too contextual with its mechanical interactions, I think it probably wouldn't, be as interesting, because a lot of the skill of the game is really executing on all of those different things at the right times, but it also brings in frustration, I would say, often, especially for some of the more complex guys later on, because if you mess up, the punishment is not usually death, but it's a lot of lost time because you have to redo. Yeah, but
you have to reclimb.
reclimb or reinitiate the climb, which can be multiple steps or something like that. So
right. So you climb all the way up here, and like we were discussing, you get this great sort of intro, which really gives you a sense of just and this I think was the original demo, if I'm not mistaken, was this first battle.
I think so.
And you have this big tall creature. It's got a club. It moves very slowly, so you get this huge sense of weight from it, because it doesn't. You walk or run, several steps per second, I would say, and it might take a second or 2 seconds or more to do one step. So it moves very slowly, and it gives you a sense of like just how much mass is getting moved around. And that's pretty unusual in games even today. I've definitely seen it, but I've not seen it to the extent that you see it here.
Yeah, the gravity in the animation. I mean, I think that's part of their just huge success with these things. And I think has been, and the only other, I guess, series that I would call out has had any success with this is maybe the God of War games.
Yeah, that was the one I had in mind.
Yeah, with the Titans and things. But yeah, it just, and that first moment, there are few, we play so many games, and it's hard. I would say for me, just speaking for myself, it's hard to be impressed these, I feel like on a yearly basis. And I find myself seeking out the different things, right? Or the things that are surprises to me, in my, I guess I could say older age developer mind. And I just remember like both of these games just like being completely surprised, and just these multiple moments. And this particular one, the first time you mantle up that final little ledge and you see, there's the description you gave for the introduction of this thing, and you think, okay, I've heard this game is about bosses and these giants and stuff, and then you get there and the camera work is so amazing, with just a bit of handy cam and the camera shake, as you mentioned, and the framing of his foot that I think you see first, and then it kind of pans up, and then you start seeing the whole thing, and he's kind of walking away from you, and you're like, wait a second, how big is this thing? And then you just start running along the ground right near him, and you're like, what am I doing? This can't be a good idea, as a sort of self-preservationist in any video game. And it's just, I mean, Brett and I were talking.
You have those enormous hooves coming down, and you're like, man, if I get under one of those, it's over.
Yeah, and just the gravity of it, and then the other core concept that they obviously wanted you to really feel is just this sense of the impossible, right? That you are this tiny speck of this, this human with the needle, right? With the magical sword that is the key to it all. And you have these enormous beings that you have to somehow vanquish, and it's just like this dreaded, like, impossible task. And Brett and I were talking about this core concept that I think we'll probably talk about multiple times. But this feeling that you come back to time and time again with this game, more than Ico, I'd say, is that you can't believe. There were some little moments we talked about with Ico, like with the windmill or something like that, but you can't believe that. Like, you see the puzzle and you see what you probably are going to have to do to take this thing down, but you can't believe that they're actually going to let you or make you do it.
Right.
Until you do it.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, I cannot believe I just did that, or that they were asking me to do that.
Well, and the thing that's really extraordinary about them for me is that they are essentially like levels.
Yeah, right.
Each Colossi, I mean, some of them are smaller than others, but this first one in particular, and a few of the ones that we played in the first 8 are really, there are a lot of, they take 20 minutes to get. It's not just like you go and you whack it a bunch of times, and it's as much as I loved like the Tower Knight or something in Demon Souls, which is this very, very similarly tall critter that you've got to kill. but he moves a lot faster, and and he doesn't have the sense of the majestic like these do, and he also is clearly like, he's a large suit of armor, and so you think of a man. Here you think more like beasts.
Yeah.
They don't feel human, and they don't feel like they have quite the same level of intelligence. They're like giants.
They're almost, they're kind of robot, automaton kind of like, right? They have eyes that light up, and
maybe a golem or something.
Golem-like, yep.
Yep. So there's and actually that makes a lot of sense. The golem's a good tie-in because of what happens after they die. But yeah, I mean, they're just, they kind of have these patterns of movement, right? So whatever, but they're so large that to traverse over them is like you're traversing an actual level. The mechanic for that is that you have only so much of a grab and hold resource. You can only do that for so long. You have this meter. Yeah, the grip meter in the bottom right, which is a pink circle that just shrinks with use and then replenishes actually fairly quickly. So part of it is also you're climbing around and then finding places where you can rest on your way to getting to points on the body that you can stab. There are these glowing areas where you want to jab in that sword. And, when you do, these huge gouts of black blood spurt out. I mean, they're like the shadowy, but also more like a liquid than the shadows have been, like in Ico or whatever. They don't feel like that greasy. They feel like spurting. Something is just jetting out of the thing. And
if you raise the sword before you get on one, it also gives you.
It will tell you, right? It'll tell you where to go,
where the soft spot will be.
And sometimes Dormin will tell you as well.
Yeah, if you take too long,
if you can't figure it out, he'll say, "Hey, have you noticed this?"
Yeah, which is always useful for sure, and
better for usability. This game for sure.
The grip meter, and to your point about sort of like finding the rest moments and such, it provides this interesting pacing in and of itself during a battle, right? Where you're kind of this there's these ebbs and flows, and then the other thing is the tells, to the boss itself, and the animations. Like once you get on top of one and you're grabbing onto the fur. And you've obviously learned you can grab onto sort of furry things when you're even climbing the walls up to this first one. But then fur is a big theme across all of them, and that's kind of the visual language for what you can grab onto and hold onto, and also scamper across. Once you're grabbing on, you can actually move across the fur if you're using the left kick.
Like you're using both hands so you can pull yourself around. And your feet. Yeah.
But then there's these great tells because the animation is so weighty and so hefty. When it's shaking, trying to get you off because it feels you on its back or what have you, it takes longer, right? So there's these big slumbering, slow like animations that start playing, and it gives you a bit of a tell, right, of a chance to say, oh, if I'm not holding on right now, I better grab on because it's going to be a rough ride. Yeah. So it's just really, it's a natural, like there aren't a lot of artificial tells, right, that are gamey.
It's not actually flashing R1 on the screen,
No, it's all
like
behavioral.
A quick time event or something like that. It's entirely based on your ability to read what you're seeing. But because it is so slow and there's a long wind-up, by the time you're going to get really kind of shaken around. And when it shakes you around, you are really moving. It's like you're holding on with these arms, but you're also, the body's animating. He's trying to get his feet under him again. It's a great blend of the IK and sort of ragdoll, but also kind of, motion-driven or animation-driven motion. You've got all this stuff going on. It's extraordinary.
And
to think of this as a PS2 game, it was just like,
I think that was the other thing, too, yeah. That I think all of us were just at the time when it came out on that platform and just kind of, flabbergasted about what was going on. Because I think, we talked about it with Ico as well. I think another important thing with their production design is that they always go for simplicity as kind of a core tenet. And I think that's in the visual design, in the texture design, in the modeling, There's just it's all very distilled down. So I think they put their effort into the right places and not try to make everything super high fidelity or anything. You know what I mean? So they kind of put their money where it counts, and as we've heard, they have a pretty small team in the grand scheme of things, so they have to be economical in the way that they develop too, which really shows. And I think constraints like that are always good for design, and you want them. So they have a wonderful discipline as a studio that it just always I'm very, very, very envious of. For sure. But before we move, one thing I wanted to mention as we've talked about sort of the grip meter, and I'll just take this moment to talk about it. Probably my favorite. So this game, like I said, I played it multiple times. Big effect on me. I was joking with Brett. I also have a Japanese book of some kind that is Shadow of the Colossus. I think it's probably a strategy guide. I don't know. But it's on my shelf next to my Ico book that I also can't read. But I just wanted more of this game, so I just found anything I could. I had these figurines as well that were imports. Anyway, love so much about this game. Love the creature design and the combat design with the bosses and all of that stuff. The thing that I love the most, though, from a designer's perspective, is that pink circle. And the reason that I do, as you will see as you play the game, for those who are playing with us, and how it's applied throughout each of the bosses in different ways, is that it is. I can't think of a better example of an elegant convergence of design into one UI element in any other game, because that pink circle is not just your grip meter. When you are on, and I'm just going to rattle through all the different things that it does. When you're on a Colossus and you are striking it down with the sword in one of those weak spots, that thing will light up with a white circle that actually expands and kind of shows you how strong your sword hit is going to be.
It's like a golf swing meter.
Yeah, and you hold the button down, and the longer you go, and there's a risk reward there because it could start shaking in the middle of that. So
right.
you want to
lose your shot. Yeah,
you want to hold it as long as you can because you're going to do more damage, but you have to really time it well. So you're watching that same thing there. It is also your breath meter when you're underwater. It is also when you're pulling the bow and arrow, which we haven't talked about yet. It's your strength meter for that. And I'm forgetting, there's a couple others that and it's all based around this one thing. You have a health bar below that as well. And then just the concept that all of these things are related to this one, essentially grip meter and that button, right? And not just that one button because the bow uses another button, etc. But I just love that there's sort of a simplicity to all of that.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if maybe you can jump into sort of like taking this thing down and what happens after you take one down, but then I'll make another point then too.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so you climb around on it, and for the first one, we can talk about each one if we want to, or we can kind of pick ones that we liked. But for the first one, just to give a sense of it, you need to get up close and right next to his legs, right? Like I was saying, it's the most terrifying place to be because you're worried this foot's going to come down on you. And you jump up to where its Achilles heel is, and you jab it in the Achilles heel a couple times to make it go down on a knee. And once it's done that, you're actually able, that little lighted area on its heel goes away, and you can actually climb further up its leg and to the small of its back. And from there, there's a good place to rest because there's like a shelf, basically in the back of its belt. It's made all this stuff's made out of stone, so they're like stone and fur. That's why I think golem's probably an even better idea. Like these things have been constructed by some kind of magic, maybe, and they have lights in their eyes and things, so they do look maybe kind of like magical beings of some kind. And then you can climb from there up to the very top of its head. And basically, on the crown of its head is the other spot where you need to jab it. But it will bend down and start shaking its head back and forth, and you're trying to hold on there long enough to get in a blow and deliver it before it starts paying off on one of these wind-ups. it doesn't ever just reach out and swat you off, which is, of course, the only thing that kind of is missing. It's like it doesn't just hit you off, which you would think it would be able to do. But maybe that's an animal thing. And as you finally knock it down, these great gouts of blood are spurting out, and finally it falls. And there's a couple points about that. One is that the order in which you attack it is important. It's not the case that you could do a little bit of damage on the heel, climb up to the head, and then climb all the way back down and stab it in the leg to finish it off. It's a kind of a puzzle, and that you have to do it in a particular order. You can't just kind of, if you know it, just do it, in kind of a random order. The reason for that is so that they can pay off, on the final blow and know where you're going to be and then animate accordingly. Yeah. So when it's not going down to one knee because we hit it in the Achilles heel. It's, throwing its head back, and its arms kind of out a bit, like it's been hit in the head. Yeah. And kind of looking skyward, and you see the light start to go out of its eyes, and it just falls to the ground. And then finally, once it's come down and control has been returned to you, you start to kind of walk away, and these black tendrils, they're like ribbons of something,
Shadow.
They're not, shadow, but there's like a rim of light on them as well. They kind of circle around and enter your body, and then you collapse, only to wake up back at the temple that you spoke to this voice from the sky.
Yeah, which, as a quick aside, is probably obvious, but an interesting, fictionalized way, clever way to not make you backtrack.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
you don't have to climb down.
Well, we're going to knock you out with these shadow tendrils, and you're just going to wake up back there, and you don't need to, run all the way back. So it's elegantly and kind of fictionalized and kind of and it feels like it makes sense and it should work that way, but there's also some usability there that I always liked, because I don't want to run all the way back.
Yeah, no, and it would be kind of a pain. Well, and then of course once you're there, I mean the point of that is to come back. When you come back, you're collapsed on the floor. There is a shadow standing over you, just kind of looking down at you mournfully, and the camera will pan over to a statue which represents the Colossus you've just killed, and it will kind of shake and infuse with light and then crumble. And the camera will pan back to you. The shadow man is gone, and you stand up. And Dormin speaks to you again, telling you about the next battle.
Tells you about the next one, and excuse me. I needed to research this. I'm not sure if I'm right on this, but I believe also that once the shadow's gone and you wake back up, there is a bird near her on the slab there, and with every one that you kill, another bird is added there too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's a subtle thing.
I noticed it, and I wasn't sure I was right about whether the number corresponded, but that makes sense.
I couldn't remember exactly. I need to confirm that, but I believe I read that at one point, yeah. But yeah, that's just a subtle thing. I don't think it plays into anything later, but they do a good job.
But the reflections of these things do start to add up to something just on their own. I mean, because they're little details, like, the number of shadows that appear around your body, or the number of
you've killed,
number that you've killed, the number of birds are the same. It starts. It gives this, weight.
Well, and you're doing this
mythological weight, say, or whatever, a sort of a weight in the lore that's not explained, but that you can feel.
You can feel, and that there's meaning behind it, and that you get this sense of sort of subtle progress, and the birds are surrounding her, which is appropriate because you're doing all this to try to revive her and bring her back to life and all of that stuff. And then, and I don't know if you were going to mention this now or later, but as you should notice over the course of these 8, and we can jump around and talk about some of the future, the next ones you take out, but every time you take one of them out, there's a price that wander pays for taking one down and kind of essentially like taking in or soaking up the shadowy tendrils,
right,
as he kind of seems to be sort of descending into some sort of dark state himself with each kill, which is what Dormin wants you to do.
Maybe the player too.
And that's
I think you need to wrestle.
Subtext of this.
I think you need to wrestle with yourself at that point of like, I'm killing these beautiful things. They're not non-threatening necessarily. It's not so much that. It's just like, it's the instinct of a hunter, right? That if I were to see a beautiful like tiger or lion or something in the woods or bear, I would think that's majestic, and I wouldn't personally myself want to hunt. Like, that wouldn't be my response.
Yeah.
But that's what you're being asked to do here, in service of this larger goal. I guess if I had a larger goal that I was pursuing, obviously, things would change. But if I actually needed to eat, whatever. But or was worried that it was going to come back,
or bring your, friend back to life or something.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sure. And that's something we always talked about with this, and I think for those who are playing along, if you haven't played before, I hope you're seeing this too, because I think it is we always talked about that subtext of these are animalistic giants to some degree, right? They do feel like golems or sort of not necessarily, there's some innocence to them, that they're here, they didn't ask to be disturbed, and clearly this Dormin guy wants you to do this, but they're and you're not being very nice to them, I mean, and they're not
suffering.
Happy. They're suffering. Yeah, suffering is a good word for it, and you feel bad when you play this. I do, at least, feel bad when I play this game because of that. And I love your point about sort of it's taking a toll on him, but it's also taking a toll on you. Yeah. If you have a heart.
Yeah, if you have a heart. If you only have a heart. Or courage. So, I don't want to spend time on each one just because there are 8 of them.
Yeah.
But maybe to, call out a couple that I particularly like. One is the Entombed Giant. There's several, actually. I'm just going to run through them, and you can hop in and say things about them if you want. The first one we killed is called the Valley Wanderer. And I'm taking these names, actually, from the achievements or the trophies or whatever that you get with the PS3 edition.
Yeah.
The second is the Sloth, which is a 4-legged creature down by kind of a very low-lying lake.
One quick thing I want to mention that is on that one. I don't know if you ever saw it, but they did. It was either leaked or was officially revealed that they showed one of their prototype videos of that one, which was the second one is the first one that they developed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Did you ever see that?
I suspect it's the bonus material actually that's on the disc.
Okay, maybe there is. Yeah, maybe they showed it there officially, but. The interesting thing about that is that they reveal there that the game originally started out as a co-op game, and in the prototype they're on this open plains fighting that second one, and there's 4 players all on horses.
Oh wow!
Hunting it down together and trying to take it down together, and of course they didn't go in that direction.
They could have been Monster Hunter.
They were ahead of. Would that have been ahead of their time?
I think so.
I don't remember when the first Monster Hunter came out. But yeah, so the sense of, you can imagine coming from Ico that co-op would be on their mind maybe. But so seek out that video. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, the first Monster Hunter was PS2, so it might have been development. I don't have a release date, but it was PlayStation 2. 2004. So... they would have been prototyping at the same time. Would have been around the same time or even before. Yeah. So the next one is the Disturbed Sleeper, which is on the top of this tall.
Oh yeah. With the big sword
pedestal.
thing.
I mean, it's actually a constructed object that it's on. Yeah, it's got a huge sword or something club don't know, it's not exactly a sword. It's not exactly a blade, but after that is the gravestones one. There's another four-legged one that has a puzzle element to how you actually distract it to be able to climb it.
Well, even the previous one, I think they do a good job at escalating mechanics as well, and kind of adding them together. Because the previous one, the sort of minor puzzle is you needed to, basically you need to stand on this disc that's more unbreakable than the rest of it, I guess, and it hits, it swings its sword and hits the ground, but it sort of, with that vibration, shatters some of the armor that's on it.
Yeah, to make it so you can climb it. Yeah,
to climb through certain.
Yeah,
sections.
You start getting these progressively, like use the environment a little bit to figure this out. So there's that one. The next one is this sort of horse-like creature, or what is like a four-legged spider. I don't know what it is.
No, it feels reminds me of a horse, and it's got like a rib cage, and it's very undead.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's very creepy, that one.
But that one has 4 entrances to it's just an underground tunnel area.
Tombs, which are from that era I talked about last time in Ico, that era of ancient Japanese sort of Shinto beliefs. Those are kofun tombs, basically. Or they're reminiscent of. But
anyway, I wasn't aware of that. But it'll go and kind of look at where you went in, and you can come out on another side and run up and jump onto its tail. So that's another kind of environment thing. You have to use that. The next one, and this is one of my 2 favorites from these 8, is the bird that's flying around around a lake.
Oh man.
And this one's really good because you have to tempt it to come after you by shooting arrows at it, which is hard because it's far away. So you actually have to time your shots. Your arrows are not instantaneous. Like, it takes a while. Like, it's like a real arrow. Although you can shoot them a lot further than you'd be able to shoot an arrow.
Well, you can do the lock-on thing too.
I didn't do that.
Yeah,
I didn't do that.
Which I want with the next couple ones. I want to mention a little bit more about that because of some frustrations. But yeah. So shoot with an arrow.
That's interesting. Because that probably would be one of them easier.
R1, I think.
Will lock on as well.
It looks at, that's the button you can press to have it always look at the...
Oh, that's L1. Yeah, L1.
Right, sorry. L1, right. That you always look at the... If you're doing that, if you do that with your bow and arrow out, it sort of does a lock on.
Sort of track it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, that makes sense. What I like about the L1 is that if you're not near a Colossus, you just hold L1 anytime. It'll just kind of come up close to Wander, and it'll just kind of look to the left, and it'll pan over to the right.
Yeah, it kind of tracks him.
It just kind of looks in 2 directions, so you can just get this. You get a much closer sense of him than you normally
It is weird.
Get.
Yeah, it is a funny
It's a weird choice, but I love it. I mean, I was like, I don't remember that. These are little touches I don't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, you have to attract the bird's attention, and then basically it flies at you, and you have to jump and grab onto it while it's flying right at you. And if you don't do it in time, like, it just whacks you and does a bunch of damage, and you fall into the water, and then you have to do it again.
So this, I think, it sounds like for both of us, this one in particular is very memorable. But for me, like, kind of going back to those points of like those moments in gaming when you're looking for something to be surprised by and impressed by, right? When you're kind of surrounded by this stuff all day, every day. I will never ever forget this fight.
Yeah.
And
for a number of reasons.
And for me, like, it's a combination of weird things like the water. Right, like, I already hate dark water, right? And this whole thing takes place. You're swimming through it, and when if he hasn't seen you yet, when you first get there, he's just perched on this big tower, and he's not flying yet if he hasn't seen you. And for my personal, I'll make it quick. But my personal story of the first time I played this one, I actually. I don't know if I had missed Dormin's hint or whatever it was, but I was stumped for a while. I couldn't figure out how to get. He was just flying around and around, and I was trying to climb up the other towers, and it just took me a while. And then there was this moment where I either heard Dormin's hint or I realized I could use my bow and arrow to try that. And then that revelatory moment when you first shoot him, and he kind of, whenever you alert these the colossi, their eyes go from blue to kind of an orange. So and usually there's an audio cue as well. They make a sound, and the music will change as well. The music is wonderful in this game. I also bought the soundtrack back in the day. Anyway, you now know you've gotten his attention. He starts circling, but then he starts going lower and lower, and you stand on this sort of little platform that's right at the surface of the water. So you're literally at the, kind of standing on water in a way, and already weird because of that dark water I mentioned. And you're between these two columns with this bridge above you. So it's like a perfect space for him to fly into. And I just remember that first moment where he's flying lower, kind of circling, and then he's kind of lining himself up right at you. And he's coming at you, and I'm thinking to myself, what are they wanting me to do? They're not. There's no way that they want me to jump on this guy as he is flying straight at me at the speed that he is and as big as he is. And then he gets closer and closer, and then you see the fur on his wing, and you're like, oh, my God.
Yeah. Well, and for me this time, even though I knew that was what I was going to have to do, I had lost track of him, and I was looking the wrong direction.
Oh, that's good.
And I'm like, I can't see him. So I turn around, and he's right there.
Yeah.
And I immediately had to jump and grab.
That's so
and
good.
I did it. And it was so beautiful. I was just so perfect.
But he's flying, he's so big and heavy, and he's soaring so slowly, but he's so big.
But your sense of how fast you're going once you're on him
is amazing.
Like, oh my God, I'm actually going really fast, and there's lots of visual cues for the speed. Like there's basically vapor trails and and
the
it's
sound,
really amazing. Yeah,
the audio, the music, and then just the fur is whipping in the wind. You know, they have some of that similar sort of physics on the fur.
Mm-hmm.
And then because of the grip meter, which we talked about, which creates some of that natural tension and pacing, because it forces you to take these breaths. You have to also read his body language, and find spaces while he's flying to let go and run around to charge up your grip meter again. Before he turns or banks.
Before he banks, yeah.
And oh my God! And then when you start doing damage to him, one of the spots on him is actually one of his wings. And when you do that damage, it kind of causes that wing to kind of collapse, and he does a spiral. And you're literally hanging on him while he's flying upside down, and he just wanders, holding on for dear life. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's one of the most. I mean, it's one of the most amazing moments in all of games. I mean, just like
I think so.
I mean, all of these are good, but the bird and some of those ones, especially in the second half, I'm just like, the next one I really quite like too, because he's the most human. He's the entombed giant. He's this giant that's in. You have to go underground to find, and there's a succession of walls that he breaks through to kind of, you're trying to get over these walls and get away from him because you have nowhere to hide. And on the far wall from where you enter, there's actually a little niche or something that he can't just swipe away. I don't know if it's too thick or whatever, but he kind of gets up close and he looks through and he brings his head all the way down to your level, and you run out and jump into his beard. It's just like, oh my God.
And the beard has nice volume to it too.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, it's really thick. I'll have to work on mine. Try to get to that. But you go to him, and he's his is the top of the head, and then you climb down onto the small of his back. You can see him twisting. It's just extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is the Waves of Thunder, which is sort of like an eel, I would say.
Terrifying water, and
and that one's particularly scary because it's going underwater. It's like a serpent. It's making the serpentine up and down movement like a sine wave. So you go in and out of the water as its body, parts of its body go in and out of the water. So to move forward on it, you basically have to move while that part's out of the water, and then grab on and hold on while it goes underwater, and then move again. I mean, it's
there's a natural pacing to that, and your breath meter and your grip meter are the same. And
right. So you're spending them, and you're like, oh, I can't let go while I'm underwater because I'll have to start over again. Yeah. And you have to kind of go at the base of these three electrical things, which is another thing, is that if you are underwater and near enough to one of these spikes that come out of its back, it'll electrify and do a lot of damage, and so that's bad. So it's like you don't want to get too close to that before it goes underwater because you don't want to take the damage, but you need to be able to get up to it then in the next one. So it's this tough thing. That one's the one that gave me the most trouble this time. And then finally, the one that I'd say is probably my least favorite of these 8 is the last one we played, which is the wall scaler. That's what I called it. I don't remember if that's what it was called. But it's a 4-legged creature that spits fireballs, basically. And then
like a salamander sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. If salamander's great.
Or a lizard.
And it climbs... Oh, we should talk about the lizards, too. Maybe next time. It climbs up on the sides of this wall, and you have to run around to the other side and shoot a couple of its legs with your bow, so it will fall down onto its back, and you can stab it in its belly once you've done that. But the thing that's terrible about that is it's hard to get down there fast enough without taking massive damage just by jumping. Yeah. You don't want to just jump all the way down there, so you have to run down these stairs, and not a lot of time. So that one was maybe my least favorite just because I felt like it was a little bit unfair timing-wise. I ended up sometimes just like running down to a lower level and then jumping off and knowing I was going to take a bunch of damage just so I could get there soon enough to start stabbing it. So.
Yeah, one sort of pro tip thing that frustrated me last night for those who may play this one, because I actually ended up taking way longer on this one than I had intended to and forgot about. So I was like, why am I having so much trouble? So I mentioned the L1 lock-on, but you can use with the bow and arrow quite effectively most of the time. In this case, though, if you're locked on and you need to shoot the bow and arrow at anything other than the center mass where it's automatically locked onto, you can kind of nudge with the right stick to kind of aim it, but it is not intended to do so and is very finicky and almost impossible to actually do any precision aiming with. And so for this guy, it finally dawned on me that I shouldn't be locking on him. I actually just need to use the bow in just a free aim way. And then
I used the lock on just to get me centered, and then I let it go.
And I just kept it in, and it couldn't, you can do it, but it's way too hard. So it just took me forever until I remembered that. And so just don't do that. Yeah. You'll have a much easier time with this guy. There's also a theory, I didn't look it up in the strategy guide, but there's also a theory I was trying to test that I didn't really get to finish testing before I finally took him out, is I'm wondering if the higher that he is when you knock him off, if the longer he stays on his back.
Yeah, I did get that sense because when I finally was able to do him in, he was as high as he got, and he fell a long way. I was only a couple levels up, so it gave me plenty of time to get down without having to jump down and climb around on him and stab him several times. So I think that's probably the case, and that's probably why he sort of varies where he climbs to.
You can lure him, right? I mean, you can lure him to the place where you want him to climb to, and then because they'll kind of look in the window for you. Yeah. And the key is you want him to see you, and then when you sneak up behind him, kind of thing. But not the best one for sure. But I love the sense of, especially with the giant under the temple and all that stuff. I love this. They do a great job at these sort of like tombs or dungeons that are the open world, which we should talk about more next time. Yeah,
next time I want to talk a lot about the environment because I have some special thoughts about that. Also the lizards.
Yeah, let's talk about lizards and the fruit and various things. Yeah, but and then we got to talk about the horse Agro, as I now am corrected. We need to talk about him a lot more too, especially because there'll be some gameplay reasons to talk about him next time. Yeah. But I would assume, not having played Last Guardian yet, that there's a lot of nice correlations with Trico or whatever the creature's called.
Trico. Yeah.
Like an animal that has some of its own personality and decision making, I guess.
Yeah, Trico's a lot like a smarter and friendly Colossus.
Yeah.
So it's really merging a lot of stuff that's been going on in these other two games.
Yeah, it seems it's
and Trico is the game. Like, I mean, yeah, there's all the navigation stuff. Like we talked about with, Ico, the puzzles are there to build this kind of relationship, more than they are to be difficult puzzles. Although on occasion you get those moments of like, oh, I'm going to have to do that. Same thing here in The Last Guardian. Anyway.
And they're a means to an end, really, kind of thing, right? Like they're not really the end. The puzzles aren't really.
They're to focus you on the real meat of it, which is I'm having this experience with this creature, or these creatures, So.
Which is another very unorthodox way of thinking from a design perspective, right? Like usually we put all this blood, sweat, and tears into this level design with some sort of puzzle relationship with the player, and it's all about that, versus and the companion, if there's a companion there, it's about that, right? Versus building up the means to an end for actually building the relationship. And it's just it's kind of like a 180 way of thinking that I feel like we need to learn some of these lessons from these games. I know I do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we still make that mistake.
I think it's because you end up shooting yourself in the foot besides, because you want the puzzles, if you're focusing on puzzles, to be tough enough to justify their existence. But then you have players who are going to be frustrated by that, so you have to work in some way to make them easier, or at least give you clues. And, like, you end up spending a lot of time on this element, which is kind of friction in the game.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal if, it's kind of the focus. I mean, if it's specifically a puzzle game, right? But these games aren't really puzzle games, even though they have some puzzles in them sometimes.
Yeah.
Not so much Colossus, but
it's just there to give you some sort of challenges and roadblocks to learn from.
It's the obstacle course you have to go through, so that you can have this experience
to give it meaning. You have to accomplish.
You have to be, have enough time around these things to make it matter, to you, to feel something for them.
Yeah.
Whether that's Yorda or Agro, or the Colossi. I mean, each battle is probably half an hour. Maybe a little bit less because you are running around to them. But I'm at like 5 hours and something. Although I did take a long detour at one point.
I think I'm not that far. I don't have that much in. Some of them I've been doing pretty quickly. The other quick thing to mention too that I forget if it has much of a significance, but with each Colossus that you take down, once you take them down, there's a beam of light that shoots from them.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out
to the sky.
I took a note and I forgot to bring it up. Yep. And if you go back there, actually, if you go back to where the body is, it gives more credence to the sort of golem sort of thinking, because there's like a pile of rock and dirt and stuff, but the fur is gone. You can't even really deduce what the original shape was necessarily. So it's like the original clay that this thing was made from and stone, is just now in a big heap. So you can go back to them. The beams kind of disappear when you get really close. But yeah, they're like signposts in the world and a constant reminder, of that you should be feeling bad about yourself. It's like a memorial, right? I mean, they remind me, and this is a really dark place to go, but they remind me of, the World Trade Center lights that they put up. Because they look like that, right?
Yeah,
and,
searchlight kind of,
Exactly, enormous spotlights going up to the sky, indefinitely high, as far as you can tilt the camera.
Well, and Dormin is speaking from the sky, right? So you get this kind of sense that maybe he's up there someplace. Yeah. And as you'll see, as we'll see, as we're playing through the game. Once you get closer to the 16, right? There's so many of those lights in the sky around the world that it really, I think, it's really effective.
Yeah.
Because you get a sense that you've been impacting things along the way to kind of show that progress. Yeah.
All right.
Whew.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. Yeah, we're here at like an hour and 15 minutes, so we should probably blast through. I don't have a lot of feedback per se, but I did want to call out a couple of Twitter users. One is Jaful, who's a longtime acquaintance of mine through the internet, who via Twitter said they had loved the eco discussion and was looking forward to Colossus. And he said, I think it being billed as only boss battles made me take sharper notice of just how much there is in this world. And it's actually pretty amazing. And he says, never has virtual space felt more real. Which I agree, and it's something we'll talk about next time. So we'll put a pin in that one.
Yeah, we talked about in pre-show just kind of some of the similarities to the isolation of the castle in Eco, and even though this is a big open world, the isolation you feel in this world, even though
and I have another. Yeah, I have other thoughts about it as well, but I'm just teasing that for next time. And the other one was from Gothic Chocobo via Twitter, if that is your real name.
Good one.
He and in the show notes, I'll give the two links that Gothic did. One was from Mark Brown, which was actually about Eco. He does a YouTube series called Game Maker's Toolkit, which is really quite good. I've watched a lot of his videos, and I hadn't caught on to the fact that he had an Eco one yet. I haven't gotten that far. I've been going from the beginning. So I'll have the link to that. It's a really good discussion of minimalism and sort of cutting away stuff to really accentuate what you do have.
Zen Garden.
And the other one is Extra Frames, part of the Extra Credits series. So that's, if people are familiar with that. He has one about specifically about Shadow of the Colossus and how the animation really reinforces a lot of things that are going on in the game. And he talks about quite a number of things that we talked about here. I haven't watched the whole thing, but in the bits that I did watch, these were all things that we've definitely talked about and we pointed out. It's part of a series talking about the 12 rules of animation or laws of animation, and this was the first one, so it was kind of cool for that to be kicking off his series. So yeah, both highly recommended, and as I said, they'll be in the show notes. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Brett_Duville, and he's
at Tim Longo Jr. with the JR.
And we can also be found via the podcast Twitter feed, which is at Dev Game Club. I throw stuff out there every now and again. We'd also love to get more iTunes reviews and things like that, just to have some more to read on the air. We like your email too at devgameclub@gmail.com. We love to hear from you, and we love to discuss your thoughts. So if you have some, by all means, send them our way. Or, just be goofy. That's fine. We can do that. Just try to make it, family friendly as much as we can. But yeah, that's about it for us tonight, because there's a lot going on in this game, and we've kind of crammed it into an hour and 15 minutes. Next time we're going to finish the game. So that's the other 8 boss battles, and we'll be talking about that next week. So you will, I guess we'll see you on the internet, or we'll talk to you then. Good night.
Good night.
And we'll have to talk about music. We'll have to talk about the world.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about Agro. All this stuff. We have to talk about the lizards. The lizards.